Welcome to the Everton Byline. This is episode number 61. Might be the tiredest Everton Byline we've ever done in those 61 and a few more episodes. I am Matt Jones. Joining me, as ever, is Paddy Byline from The Athletic. We are mere hours on, Paddy, from Everton were kicking off about 12 hours ago against West Ham last night. And here we are to talk about it. How are you? Has the coffee been flowing in the Boylan household this morning?
No, it's still too early for that, but it definitely is needed because I'm a little bit bleary-eyed this morning. I think it just shows our commitment, Matt, to getting the podcast recorded and out there as quickly as possible. Obviously, with it being a Monday evening game, not ideal from a byline perspective. Not ideal from anybody's perspective, really, given the logistics around it all. So yeah, getting out as quickly as possible. I always find there's more of a spring in the step after a positive Everton result, and this was not obviously a particularly positive Everton result. So, haven't got that, I would say, this morning.
No, absolutely not at all. But yeah, I'm on my second coffee personally, so maybe Paddy will liven up potentially as the show goes on.
I'll try.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Just a reminder, as ever, we are sponsored by the Bridewell. You can see the logo in the bottom left-hand corner. If you're watching us on YouTube, if you're watching us on YouTube, do hit like, do hit subscribe, do leave us a comment on anything we speak about today. Obviously, it's going to be mainly about the match last night, so it'd be interesting to get people's thoughts on that. You can do the same if you're listening to us on iTunes, on Spotify, or anyone else as well. Please leave us a rating. Please leave us a review. If you want to get in touch with us about anything, it's evertonbyline@gmail.com. I'm just going to let you know this, Paddy, actually, before we start. One of our match-going friends, who I'm not going to name, for reasons that become clear very shortly, told me that last week he was listening to the podcast whilst painting his flat with no clothes on.
Right.
So I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on that potentially. It's interesting that people listen to us in these situations, really, I think. And, kind of unnerved me for a second when I was informed, not going to lie.
Yeah, there's probably 2 points there. The first is an obvious gag to make about paint drying.
Yes, that's exactly what I said as well, yeah.
Which, probably leave that one there. The second is, it sounds like something Dave Downey would do, but it's a flat. It's a flat. So I'm guessing it's not Dave in this.
No, it was not. I'll categorically rule out Dave, but
I think I won't in this particular matter. I won't pass too much judgment. People feel free to listen whichever way they way.
Any situation with any of else's clothes on, as you would like. But yeah, so yeah, tell us about that. If you listen to us in a stranger situation than that, it would be interesting to hear that. Certainly when Everton have seemingly gone to pot a little bit. We may need other things to talk about, but yeah, let's get into it, Paddy. Just a reminder as well, we did do post-match podcast last night from the Derby Castle as well. Myself, Mark Mosey, Ed McCosh, Matt Flusk, and Liam Knight as well. So if you want some potentially a little bit rawer sort of analysis in inverted commas about the game, then do check that out after you finish listening to us today. But yeah, Paddy, I sort of put on Twitter yesterday, and I think sometimes with this team this season, I kind of come out the ground and watched it, certainly the Wolves away game, and thought, you know what, like O'Brien's all right at right back, we'll be fine. Or I thought, centre back, we can cobble through there. Mikolenko's okay as well. Then you look at the midfield, and Idrissa Gueye can just do another year because he can. Njai will be fine on the right hand side. Because he's just a good player, and Grealish is obviously brilliant, and with the strikers, not great, but we'll cobble through.
Yeah.
And then there are other games like last night where everything is just flipped, and I think any kind of little fear maybe we've had about this team, where we spoke about it over the summer about not being able to do everything, and how it was going to take a long time. I kind of felt like West Ham just showed up all those fears last night, really. Like the fullbacks just got technically and physically dominated the forwards out wide. The midfield was really chasing shadows, I think, from about minute 30 until the end of the game, really. And And West Ham just looked, I won't say a lot better, but I just thought they looked better and sharper and crisper in so many stages of that game last night. And I suppose it's one of those where, a couple of weeks ago we talked about like the hype train and expectations for the season. We kind of didn't really know where to pitch them. Yeah. And I think it's matches like that which just kind of dial down any real thoughts of like, the team will push for Europe or top half, and you kind of look at it and think, where actually is this squad and where should this team be aiming? Because I think it showed up a lot of weaknesses in the squad that game last night.
Yeah, it did. You're right, and all of the ones that you mentioned really, and probably more. I think a couple of obvious points to make. Like West Ham, in terms of certainly their attacking players, are a lot better than they're showing. I think when you've got Somerville and Bowen and Paqueta and players like that, they probably should be doing better in the table. So they inevitably got some form of bounce with Potter having gone and Nuno coming in. I mean, terrible timing on that from an Everton perspective. Really felt for Graham Potter as well, and having to go through press conferences only to then get sacked soon after. I mean, normally when a manager does a pre-match press conference, it's a pretty clear indication to us in the media and fans that he's going to be staying on. So, I mean, that felt quite wrong, I think, from a kind of an ethical, moral perspective.
The same thing happened to Dyche, didn't it?
It did. I mean, he also got sacked very late in the day before a game, even later than Potter did with Nuno, in fairness. But I think what that meant was that this was going to be a tougher game. As a result, new manager comes in, players are trying to impress, and I think what they did in the opening 20, 30 minutes or so, West Ham they sat really deep. Like I looked at, I tracked the stats more or less throughout the game, and I think within about 20, 30 minutes, Everton had 65% possession. It was only when they scored that it started to go equilibrate and go back to 50-50-ish. Sat deep and then looked to use the pace of Somerville on the counter. I think the last 3 games, and I'll include the derby and also the cup game, feel like Everton have come back to reality. We've seen the squad maybe for what it is, which is incomplete and with numerous holes still in it. The Wolves game particularly was probably on Moyes in the sense that he rotated a lot and that the fringe players did not show. So ultimately, I think the book stops with him there, and that was really, really disappointing from an Everton perspective. But this was more or less, Monday night was more or less Everton's strongest lineup, certainly those available. And it just looks thin to me, and thin in just about every sense of the word. Thin in the sense that you're one injury away from James Garner probably starting at left back again. Equally, then that means that one injury also results in probably Tim Iroegbunam going into midfield, and I think that's too early for him to be a regular Premier League starter. And then you've got Beto or Tieno Barry, neither of whom to me are as yet staking a really compelling case to be Everton's number 9 for the whole season. And you can talk a little bit about service here. I don't think Beto had much service on Monday night, but he's got notable flaws in his game, and Barry's obviously not the finished article either. So you go through most of the team, and there are issues. But the one thing I really wanted to highlight, and I did so in my match piece, was just it felt like there was such a disparity in pace and dynamism between the two teams, and I think that was probably summed up most by that left-sided duo for West Ham of Diouf and Somerville versus, let's be honest, a 6'5" centre back who's playing at right back has done so pretty well on the whole, but had a really tough game on Monday. And then Njai, who, while he's contributed this season, he is also, I would argue, slightly out of position. so far this kind of shows you where Everton are. I mean, that felt like a big imbalance, and West Ham basically played on it for the whole game and deservedly got a point. I mean, the only kind of positive here, if we can call it that, from Everton, this is scant, Matt. This is really, really scant. Was that they didn't lose the game, because I thought West Ham were in the ascendancy more or less from the moment they scored and from that point on. And I was wondering if Everton were going to lose it.
Yeah, like I spoke to people after the game last night who thought like Everton probably shaded it, but I think I'm very much in your camp, really. I think obviously, like, you're right. Like, for the first 15 minutes, they are like really in charge of the ball, like key stepping forward from the centre circle of possession. West Ham had pinned back, but it was kind of like as soon as they realised that there was like a bit more space to go through, and like I just feel like they played so many sort of little passes last night through midfield that I just feel like we never ever play.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many, like, I know Paqueta's a really good player who gets into some good positions, and like the lad they signed from Southampton, Fernandes, looks like a really good player as well. But just so many times they just push that ball like through a couple of lines into a player in space on the half turn. I just feel like we never do that. Like, certainly about Jared Branthwaite in the team, he's probably the one, our centre back who's best on the ball. And I said on the post match podcast last night, like, we need him back in the team as well, because defence looks a bit shaky, really. But like, it felt like after they realised they could play those passes and find those spaces, like, they never really. Like, Everton had a little flurry at the start of the second half, didn't they? When they came out, they probably on top then for about 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, I thought Everton started the second half really quite well without creating obvious clear-cut chances. I don't know about you, but like it got really edgy inside the stadium, more or less from the moment Jared Branthwaite did that back header.
So you mean Jake O'Brien? Sorry,
Jake O'Brien. Sorry, Jake O'Brien did that back header to Jordan Pickford. Somerville nicks in, favourite to score, to be honest, and Pickford pulls off a really good save. And it just felt like that was, in my head, that became the momentum switch in the match, and all of a sudden clearances started to get a bit panicky. They weren't finding the men, and West Ham got a foothold. They scored pretty soon after, and then probably could have scored again. I mean, there were a few things that just didn't quite fall to them in the box, and a couple of players, I think it was Fulkrug at the back post from one cross, who fluffed his lines completely. So I actually thought Everton did start the second half quite well, but they didn't create. If you go back over the whole match, didn't really create any golden chances. I mean, the one that Michael Keane scores in the first half is a great finish. It's slightly behind him, the cross. Good cross from James Garner, but slightly behind him. It's a really great finish. Not one that would register high in kind of any shot calculation model, something like XG. But it's just, I don't think they're able to sustain it, and I don't think they've shown complete performances. It might be something to do with substitutions and when they happen, and lack of depth in key areas. But I basically felt that West Ham got on top, and there was no way. Everton didn't find a pressure valve, didn't find a way of stemming the tide. So they didn't have a striker up front who could hold the ball, and the other lads further back weren't keeping it well enough. And when you've got neither of those things, together with nobody who can carry the ball, I think of the nature of like a Somerville, I think you're in trouble, really. Like, the lack of kind of transition threats, as Moyes would call it, was notable. And he was, after the game, he was disappointed with the amount of transition threats.
From their perspective?
From a West Ham perspective, the amount of times West Ham got in difficult positions, particularly in the second half, from an Everton perspective. I mean, his point, certainly in the build-up and after the game, it's been that West Ham is sort of in a false position. I don't think they've got very good defenders, by the way, and that's going to be probably Nuno's biggest challenge. But he was talking about they've got a load of players because they got into Europe and they were able to sustain it with PSR. They've got a load of players he described as being in kind of the £40 million bracket. People that I think they spent about 40-ish on Paqueta. Bone was obviously less, but would cost a lot more now. Various players who, in that bracket, you would expect to come in and make an immediate impact. And Everton haven't got many, and arguably at right back, they've not got a fully functioning actual right back right now. Very heavily reliant on Mikolenko at left back, who I think at best is probably kind of your average Premier League type and much more focused on the defensive side than the offensive. And this is what I mean about it just being a bit thin. I mean, O'Brien shifts across to right back, which means now that actually with Branthwaite injured, you've only got Tarkovsky and Keane
Yeah.
as your fit central defenders. So for argument's sake, if something was to happen to one of those central defenders right now, Branthwaite's not going to be able to come straight back into the team, you wouldn't think, given how long he's been away. Does Jake O'Brien shift inside to centre back, and then does that mean a change at right back with Coleman or Patson? That's what I mean about it being thin. It just feels like they're in those situations all over the pitch, and then they've got the big glaring ones like centre forward or right back where they are clearly short. So I mean, Moyes and Kinnear have both spoken about this being a project over multiple windows. I think it's in weeks like this, and I'll even tag on the derby at the other end to make it 8 or 9 days. But weeks like this where you realise where Everton truly are, and I think that's there will be good results. I'm sure of that, but there will also be bumps in the road, and I think there'll be quite a few, to be honest, this season.
Yeah, there was a time last night where I was sort of saying get Coleman on, to be honest, because I think he would have dealt with Somerville a little bit better just through experience and knowing that position. Like O'Brien just
Maybe.
But I think when he's the only time he's really struggled, I think, is when he's come up against players who are just like so fast and like can just sort of just really like I remember when Doku came on against Goodison last season and he just walked past them a couple of times. He's just so much quicker, and there was a bit of that last night, wasn't there, with Somerville, and the youth is you was so impressed with him. He was great. Like be wonderful to have a left back like that. But
well, I think he only cost. I'd have to double check the figures.
15 million, wasn't he?
Yeah, I was about to say 16-ish. No, Crystal Palace had looked at signing him in January as well. I mean, like if he came into Everton's team, he'd be arguably a big upgrade. And I mean, speaking to our West Ham reporter at the game last night, he was saying like this lad looks like he's going to be a £40 million player within 6 months, given the performances so far. Just adds such a threat from left back. And I think the fullbacks in the modern game provide such balance, don't they? Because certainly from an Everton perspective, what the wingers really lack are options to support, to kind of overlap or underlap, to take opposition defenders away, so they've got more space. I mean, how often do you watch Grealish or Njai get the ball, and they are basically 1v1 against, or even 1v2? I mean, like, for me, it was really clear how often Wolves doubled up on Grealish when he came on against Molineux. And more or less from Everton's side, the plan is, if that happens, Grealish shuffles the ball 5 yards inside to James Garner, who's running onto it to strike at a goal. It very nearly scored that way on Monday night, but it's not enough. And it leaves them lacking balance elsewhere. So I just think, like I wrote in the week in the build up to this, that I felt like there were loads of issues within the team for Moyes still to resolve. Like, the conclusion you come to is that some of them will only be able to be resolved by further recruitment. But there are other areas where you look at and think they're just a bit thin. They're just lacking bodies or lacking quality in kind of key positions.
Yeah. Probably for the first time last night as well, there was a bit of a feeling around like just give it to Grealish and he'll sort it out in attack as well. Like, and I think teams are starting to cotton onto that a little bit. You mentioned there about Wolves doubling up on him. I don't know. It's just a bit disappointing that like Walker Peters got booked in after like half an hour, and like we didn't really test them after that. There'd be like there's a sense where like obviously if you give Grealish the ball, you want him to go at him a little bit, but there were a few times last night where I sort of thought like it was players gave to Jack Grealish and then everyone kind of ran away from him instead of wanting to like link up with him and kind of run off him. And I think there are times where obviously like he can use the ball better. The few times last night where he just sort of sure that how to play with his left foot, wasn't there, which was frustrating. And I think
I thought he had probably one of his weaker games since he joined the club, and that's not a dig at him. On the whole, he's been excellent since he joined. But I think there was already such responsibility on his shoulders to create. I mean, Everton is sending far more attacks down his side. Clearly, the main plan is to kind of shuffle the ball his way, and I think that's fine. But I think you need to vary. You need to mix things up. You need to have variety. Um, Ndai is not a natural right winger, I would argue. I think he'd probably look better on that side too. But we'll talk about this later. I think the suspension for Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, however unjust people think it is and was, that gives Moyes maybe an opportunity to almost try and rebalance things a little bit. It just feels like everything's got a bit skewed, a bit too much focus on Grealish without the support players to maybe help him. What are they doing up front? What are they doing at fullback? I mean, those are questions that I think are still to almost be resolved. Even if he thought he had the answers initially, I think those are questions that are still to be resolved this season for Everton.
Yeah. Well, like the second part is sort of a bit about that as well, because we're going to talk about like how he's using the new signings, and obviously, that situation there where Grealish and Dewsbury-Hall have come in and been ever presence really up until obviously this weekend when Dewsbury-Hall will be suspended. But just on the other sides as well, and how Moyes has been using them. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the striker situation at Barry, so maybe not necessarily him really, but obviously Dublin got on for, 15 minutes last night, and I thought he looked pretty good when he came on. Like a few nice little moments, obviously really confident on the ball. Happy to see more from him, but Asnu is seemingly nowhere near it. I think it's quite interesting from Moyes' perspective what he had to say about him, and obviously the situation last week where Coleman started away at Wolves at left back, which was odd to say the least. Alcaraz didn't even get on last night and was dragged off at our time against Wolves, which I thought was harsh, probably on both counts. Like I would have brought him on last night. I would have definitely left him on against Wolves because I don't think he was anywhere near the worst player. Obviously, Merlin Roll's injured at the moment, but I think we're seeing, Paddy, that these players, as much as for the future, I think a lot of them in that regard, and we're quite excited about what they potentially offer. It maybe takes a bit of time to kind of earn Moyes' trust if you're a young player coming in, and he seems quite reluctant certainly to start these players. But the Alcaraz one in particular, I think we're seeing why maybe we were getting whispers over the summer that he was a bit unsure about the signing and wasn't totally convinced by him, because it doesn't really feel like he's turned to him at many crucial points this year. Obviously started the opening game, but since then, just doesn't seem to really quite fancy him. But yeah, I suppose the broader point is that the new signings, apart from the two obvious ones that we mentioned, he's kind of drip feeding them in, and I don't really necessarily think that's helped a lot of them so far.
I don't think it necessarily will help those individual players in the sense that they're trying to get up to speed, but it's being fed in dribs and drabs. Therefore, it's going to take a bit more time for them to get used to one of the things the playing staff always comment on, and the coaching staff, is the speed of the Premier League compared to other leagues. The speed plus the kind of the physicality. Did an interview with Billy McKinley and Alan Irving fairly recently, and they basically pinpointed that as being the kind of the main challenge, certainly for players coming from overseas. They also spoke about kind of the need for them to adapt culturally inside the club to a new country, often to settle here, to kind of forge connections with their teammates. So all those kind of things, early doors, I think, sort of count against new players from other leagues when they're coming in. I think we have a manager in Moyes who is pretty close, actually, in the way he bloods these players to, say, Dyche. That's the most obvious comparison for me to draw, is with what happened at the start of last season under Dyche, where these players are kind of drip fed in over time. I mean, it's an interesting question, isn't it? Because Everton needed a variety of things over the summer. Alcaraz, as I think we discussed on the show last season, and I'd written last season, Alcaraz was somebody who always felt like he was sort of on the edges, on the periphery, trying to gain Moyes' full trust, but never quite getting there. And they obviously signed him over the summer, but that's just there to do. At that time, they feel like they need bodies. and the contract length is sort of further evidence that the 2 years plus a further year is sort of further evidence that they've not put all their eggs in his basket so far. Somebody in the press box last night said to me, I mean, they've now got a lot of players for behind the striker. Dwight McNeil can't get a look in. Alcaraz, as I say, is sort of on the periphery. You'd swap one of those for another fully functioning centre forward or another right back or even another central midfielder at times. You also wonder if they'd know Merlin Roll was going to be injured like this, whether they almost it would have been better to keep Harrison Armstrong rather than send him out on loan. I accept these are opinions sort of in hindsight, but I almost think Armstrong's as ready, if not more so, than Irabunum. If players are going to be missing, key midfielders going to be missing games. So look, there are issues there, and it's going to take a while, I think, for these players to get up to speed. I mean, it's quite noticeable to me how quickly in pre-season Moyes was telling us in the media that Asnu and Barry in particular were not ready and were players for the future. It's fine if you've got a number 9 who's consistent, but we know Beto is erratic. He'll do one good thing followed by one bad thing. He'll have one good game followed by one or 2 or 3 bad games. Asnu is there as support beyond Mykolenko, and I think the expectation, even internally, was that he'd be second choice this season. But I'd argue he's not second choice because when Mykolenko's injured, it goes to James Garner. And when he wants to put James Garner into midfield and rotate, then it becomes Seamus Coleman. So Asnu's probably and Moyes even name checked Jared Branthwaite as being somebody who could play left back in theory. So Asnu's way down the pecking order. Moyes was asked about him a few times, and I think it came off the back of him saying that he had very few left back options available, no real left back options available against Wolves. And he was picked up on it. Said, "Well, kind of Adam Asnu's there. You've just signed him, and Moyes has to agree to sign every player. He has to be on board with it. He watches them all and gives his opinion. So he sanctioned the Asnu signing. So why is he not a left back option?" And Moyes effectively said, "I don't see him as being ready yet." The comment was about, again, the physicality. Thinks he's a nice footballer, good footballer, good technically and whatever else, but is still learning about the physicality and so on. I wonder if the Roma game spooked people. I mean, it can't only be that because that's a really small sample size. But he obviously came on, didn't he, against Roma Asnu and struggled a little bit. Clearly, it's never just that, but that combined maybe with training ground appearances where he's being bullied at the back post by Tarkovsky on headers or something. I don't know, like just something that makes people think that this lad just for the Premier League doesn't seem quite ready.
I always find that interesting, like how, because like you said, like it felt very much like he's going to be your backup left back.
Yeah.
And from what you just said there, like internally, it sounded like that was going to be the case for them.
Yeah.
Like how can that change without him playing a competitive minute? Like I find that really interesting. Like I know, like you said, there'll be like little things in training that will the manager will take on and change, but all like I have no idea this applies to Asnu or not. We've not seen him at all, but there are also just some players and some personalities in general that it only really comes out to you when it kind of really matters and can give you a lift. So like how like it was just mad that he didn't play him against Wolves because like if you're gonna effectively throw that game with your starting 11, not the throw the game's probably too strong, but if you're gonna sort of roll the dice on it by making all those changes, like why not even have a look at it then? Like I don't know, unless he's like being terrible at training, like so bad in training to the point where you're thinking he's nowhere near. But
I think that's just a trust thing. But I actually do believe that while Moyes wasn't prioritising that Wolves game, he genuinely did think that he was going to get more from the players that came in. He thought that they were going to be able to be competitive in the game. I mean, what that probably showed him is that he maybe can't trust those fringe players, and he certainly can't trust them when they've not had many minutes. Because I think it's really quite tough actually to come in from the cold and perform more or less from the get-go. So I think he actually thought, well, I'll play Coleman because Coleman's going to give us a better chance here of getting through. Obviously, didn't work out that way, and I think it was a step too far for Seamus too. But what Everton have ended up with effectively is a player who has a really good youth pedigree. Did well for Bayern. Was at Barcelona before. Really good pedigree. Really good CV. Somebody who, by all accounts, did pretty well in La Liga last season on loan at Valladolid. Valladolid got relegated, but he had to defend a ton, and that probably helped his game, which was much more attacking. But still not ready. And I mean, I'm interested by that because he's played in a really good quality league. So I don't think we're talking necessarily about quality here. It's more to do with the perception of him from the coaching staff and just not being ready, Premier League ready. And I think that's all about the kind of physicality and everything else. It's a second choice left back. Sorry, who's not a second choice left back. You'd argue he's maybe fourth, fifth,
maybe fifth. Yeah,
yeah.
Like when everyone's fifth, and that's mad. Like when you consider he didn't cost that much less than that. What did we say he was 15 million? Like Ashley was 10, wasn't he? So yeah, the fullbacks last night were like, I've sort of thought we could be like able to get through with them, but just watching the way their fullbacks play compared to ours, like it was night and day really. We need to strengthen both of those positions, I think, as soon as possible. But so Premier League ready, Paddy. Anyway, to finish off, some of these referees certainly don't seem very Premier League ready at the moment, really, because I hate talking about refs 2 weeks in a row. We didn't really talk about the ref last week, did we? To be fair, so they made a joke about it at the start. But that obviously, so people I'm sure are aware, Keenan Dewsbury-Hall is going to miss the game against Crystal Palace on Sunday because he's picked up his 5th booking for his 6th Premier League game with Everton, which is mad in itself. But the last 2 have been absolutely extraordinary. I don't think that's going over the top. Obviously, we joked last week about how we have never seen a player booked for taking a quick free kick before. One of those. Last night's one, Paddy, like I just thinking back to it, just feel the reactions in the ground by me from the players on the pitch. And I sort of walked out the ground and thought, like, when I watch that back, there'll be like a trailing leg, or we would have gone high on him, or there would have been a bit of excessive force, but he literally just pokes the ball past him, and that's it. That's it. But he's now.
I need to be careful what I say here. But
be careful. Say what you want.
He does. If you watch it, he does sort of catch him a little bit on the replay. He wins the ball quite clearly. The ball is gone, and on his follow through, there is contact between the 2 players, and it's probably contact initiated by Keenan Dewsbury-Hall. I don't think that should be enough for a yellow card. Probably not even enough for a foul. You're talking about the reactions there, and obviously we're right up in the gods. So West Stand, top of the West Stand, so very much reliant on monitors working around us and stuff in the press box. My monitor was not working in the first half, but thankfully I flagged somebody at half time and they sorted it, and that was great. I was able to see the reactions as a result for that Dewsbury-Hall thing, and it's actually, when you remove the annoyance from an Everton perspective out of this, it's actually quite funny to see just how exasperated Everton are by this. Like, Dewsbury-Hall, I think he sinks to his knees with his head in his hands. He starts pounding the turf. Grealish is behind them kicking off. They kick off again at full time. I mean, there is some boos at full time. I've not yet worked out whether that was for the officials or for the performance. I thought it was probably for the officials, but
it was definitely both. Like at full time, there were boos, like a few boos by me. Like in general. So I think the referee got booed when he came off, but there was definitely a full time smattering of boos as well.
But Moyes on the touchline as well when that Dewsbury-Hall thing's going on. He's irate as well, and he always I always enjoy watching Moyes during the games because he's always at the edge of his technical area, kind of prowling around, but he's always in contact with the fourth official. He's always kind of in his ear and kind of criticising decisions. So he obviously did the same last night. I think speaking to us afterwards, he called it a shabby decision. He spoke a bit about the overall quality of the officiating in the league this season, which he thinks has been not particularly strong, quite poor, I think was his wording. And then I think he said it was ridiculous that Dewsbury-Hall is now suspended because of those 2 yellow cards. Dewsbury-Hall himself said something on social media, didn't he? Don't know if you have that to hand.
Yeah, I've got it here. So he said, forgive me if I'm wrong, and I might be, but some of these decisions are so hard to take, mind-boggling. So I think he'll probably get a fine for that, I imagine. I totally get, I totally understand the I think sometimes you can look at it and, you could say a situation where if the player's got 5 yellow cards to 6 games, there's sort of no smoke without fire. You could say, it's maybe something to do with the discipline, but the last 2 have been a complete and utter joke. That one last night, I know you've been quite diplomatic there, I think, by saying he catches him a little bit. There's just no way in a million years that's a foul.
It's not a yellow card.
Do you think it's a foul?
I'm less sure on that. I'm about 50-50 on whether it's a foul. I'm like 100-0 that it's definitely not a yellow card though.
I just don't think it's. I think he just nicks the ball away. And I think when the 2 players are running towards each other like that, there's always going to be a little bit of contact somewhere. But I just think he nudges the ball around the side of him, and we're not going to definitely score, but there's a great chance to sort of go a goal there, isn't there? And
late on as well.
I didn't quite sink to my knees and slam the floor like Kieran did, but it proper set me off that. It's one of those games where throughout the match, because everything's so frustrating, you just kind of sat there tense watching it, and then you get a moment like that and you just explode with anger. But I quite like he's come out and sort of fought his own corner there. And listen, I don't by any means think that the referees are getting together and saying, let's get Kieran Dewsbury-Hall suspended and getting booked by any means. But he's sort of just been a bit of a victim of really poor refereeing, I think.
I do think there is. I don't believe there's an agenda against him as a player, not a conscious one. But I do think sometimes officials will talk, and I do think there is certainly there's a subconscious bias that comes into decision making with players at times. So I think you see with Beto, for example, because he's a big lad and can quite clearly handle himself physically. I think the referees almost allow more contact on him than anybody else.
There was one last night where Kilman had both arms wrapped around his chest, wasn't there? And he didn't get
in the first half. So I think that there's an example. I think it actually takes quite a lot for somebody to get booked for a tackle on Jack Grealish. Again, we saw that in the first half with the cumulative nature of the fouls that eventually saw Walker Peters booked. But I don't know if there's something here with Dewsbury-Hall, again, a subconscious thing where it's sometimes the benefit of the doubt goes to players and sometimes it doesn't. And I always feel like Tarkowski probably gets away with maybe more than he should do because he's kind of a nice lad and affable and all this kind of stuff. And Tarkowski wouldn't mean to put a challenge in like that and so on. Dewsbury-Hall obviously comes across as a nice lad. I've enjoyed kind of his media interaction so far. He's been pretty eloquent in what he said, but I wonder if there's something about him that almost, and this is just pure conjecture by the way, there's something about him that kind of rubs officials up the wrong way, and they don't like his reactions and so on when decisions go against Everton. But in the stadium, I couldn't believe that was given. I mean, obviously, again, I've got access to a monitor, so I can watch it again and see the replays. But in the stadium, it didn't look like there was any kind of issue whatsoever. And you're thinking, that's just stopped Everton. They're more or less in down the left. That stopped Everton at a key moment in the game. So I kind of got the frustration there. What I would say is that as frustrating as that will be for him, and as frustrating as it'll be for Moyes. And Moyes actually thinks this is quite a big blow. If you listen to his post-match comments, he talks about kind of feeling that Dewsbury-Hall has really helped the side, particularly in possession, to create chances and to get on the front foot. I think he said it'd been a very, very good start to the season for him. 2 points. The first is that it probably does give them an opportunity to have a look at the balance behind the striker and find different ways of attacking. I think I'd like to see a bit more from Dibbling. Probably could use Alcaraz more as that direct ball carrying option in games. And the second is that I just think that this is going to happen throughout the course of the season, and that Everton need to have the squad to cope with it. So it's a good early test. It's a good early test. They've got to be better as well. Like as poor as maybe some of those decisions were in isolation, they weren't the reason, really. I don't feel for Everton, certainly not for Everton surrendering the initiative in the second half. Like the drop off in performance from, let's say, 60 to 75, 80 for me is really quite stark, quite noticeable. And in that period, like I say, Everton didn't find any way to stem the tide. The coaching staff didn't find seemingly any way of helping. You kind of look at it, I was expecting substitutions a bit earlier, a bit more proactive, because it looked like something was wrong on the pitch. But it was only when those substitutions came quite a bit later on that things started to change. Actually, they took Somerville off as well.
Yeah, that was mad.
Everton must have been delighted about. It felt like
Tom Wilson on the bench. I said this on post-match last night. Like
he always
scored against us. Yeah, what about him on? But no, go on, sorry.
Just maybe it gives them an opportunity to look at somebody like Dibbling, and I'd like to see more of Dibbling, because like the cameo last night was pretty good, 10-15 minutes, but pretty good. Beat players, won a few fouls in dangerous areas, and hoping he can add something. Maybe he's going to be an option in number 10 as well, because I know there's a view that he can play centrally, and I know there's a view that he may end up developing into that. He's not lightning quick on the wing, but he's obviously quick when he carries the ball. So let's see. There's one option. You've got Alcaraz, and I suppose that's worth discussing. Like how do you plug this gap? Because there are a few options. Roll if he's fit. Let's see. There's another one.
I think the other thing you could do is maybe put Grealish central and put Ndiaye back onto the left. Maybe. But yeah, I am interested to see what he does in that regard, because like
Ndiaye central.
Yeah, potentially, but although I don't think he's played him there yet, has he, in any of the games? But like, I honestly wouldn't even be surprised if we saw NGI up front, maybe, and like he went with that and played Grealish left, Dibbling right, and then you sort of pack the midfield a bit against Palace with, like, I'm not saying I'll do this, but like you could potentially bring Irabunam in alongside Garner and Gay. I could definitely see him trying to do something like going with a back three, I think, at the weekend as well, to try and match them up a little bit in the way they play, especially if Bradway's fit. So there are options there. Like, we've said, haven't we? Like, the position we're strongest in terms of depth is those ones behind the centre forward. So Dewsbury-Hall being injured, so being suspended is obviously a blow, because he's done all right so far this season. But if you're going to get a suspension, that's probably the one area of the squad where you look at and go, well, we should be able to figure something out there with the players we've got and the versatility of some of those players we've got. So, we will see on that. But yeah, we'll wrap it up there anyway, Paddy. Don't want to go too much into how we're going to cope against Crystal Palaces and their 20-month or whatever it is unbeaten Northern Ireland. We'll save that for later in the week. But yeah, cheers to everyone for tuning in. Just a reminder, Blue Monday, which is obviously easier. Monday is going to be tomorrow. We have got instant reaction out from the game last night as well, if you want to listen to that. Reminder, we are sponsored by the Bridewell. If you want to leave us a comment on YouTube, please do. Let us know what you think about Paddy saying that wasn't a foul. I'm interested to see what our listeners have
I categorically did not say that.
50-50.
That's why I thought I'd start that was the disclaimer at the start. It was
PGMOL Paddy. I think I've heard the calling you in the press box now. Yeah, let us know what you think about that. But serious about anything else as well. Any issues we discussed. during the pod. Let us know if you listen to us any weird situations, like our unnamed friend who I mentioned at the start. You want to get in touch with us, it's evertonbyline@gmail.com. Always good to hear from our listeners. And again, thanks to everybody who came up to us at the stadium last night and last week saying that they're enjoying the show. It is very much appreciated. But yeah, frustrating day. Fingers crossed that we can turn it around again on Sunday. Then they're back at Hill Dickinson Stadium. We'll be back at the usual time of first thing on Tuesday next week. Up the Toffees. Speak to you again soon.